In this video, I'm going to show you how to work with text boxes, how to get values out of them, and how to put values into them. So I'm going to make a new Windows Form App .NET Framework here project, and I'm going to call it text box demo. And remember, when you create your projects, create them in your X Drive folder so I can find them. Now, you don't have to do this activity. This is just to show you how to work with text boxes. So I'll close my form there. That'll close itself. And then in my form here, let's add some controls. So I'll come down to the toolbox here, and I'll open up my toolbox, and I'll just throw a button on there for now, and I'll throw a text box control. So notice when I start typing the name of a control, Visual Studio will filter the controls by whatever I've typed in. So rather than having to scroll through this whole thing and find text box, I can just type TE, and I should be able to find it right there. And maybe I want a label or something, just for the sake of the demo. There's a label. Okay, now, how do I actually put, what if I want some sort of initial value in that text box? That's the text property for that control. So if I highlight that control here and I come down to the text property, let me put in a number, 1000. So now I've entered the number 1000 down here in the properties, and you can see that the number 1000 is in this text box. This isn't a number, it's just text. So this gets us to the issue of we need to convert between numbers and text. So, and how do we do that? So let's add another button on here while I'm at it. And I will set the text property on that button to be the word clear. There we go. All right. So all of these properties here that we see in the property inspector, those are accessible from code. We can get those using the dot operator. If we know the name of the control and the name of the property, then we just say property.control, or sorry, control.property, like textbox1.text, form1.text, right? That's how we do this. So it's the name of the object followed by the name of the property. So I'm going to double click on my clear button here. So let's look at how we would clear the text control. So that was text box 1, there we go. So how do I do anything with its text? Well, I use the dot operator, and then I have to use the text property. So here's all the properties on this control, but I don't care about them. I just care about the text property. So let me set it to nothing, an empty string. And now I'll run my project. And there we go. So say I have the number 1000 in my text box. I want to click clear. Boom. I have set the contents of that text box to an empty string. All right. So what else could we do with a text box? What if I wanted to put a value into the text box for some reason? Let's go to the form here, and I'll bring up my toolbox, and I'll just add another button on here, and I'll call it reset. Or I'll change the text property to reset, and let's double click on that. So let's say I wanted to put a value back in the text box. Well, it's the same thing, right? I just can put in a number here inside of the quotation marks. So the quotation marks indicates that this is a string. This is text. So text boxes have a text property, which is a string. And when I wanted so anything I put into the text box has to be a string. And we can indicate a string using the quotation marks. So if I run this, I can click the clear button. There we go. And if I click reset, see it put the number 1000 back in the box. Well, what if I want to get the value out of a text box and do something with it? Well, now I have to convert between text and integers, or text and floating point numbers, or text and doubles. Or I'm going to have to do some sort of conversion. So let's make a variable here inside the class. So a class is a collection of functions, these are our functions, and data. So let's add some data here. We'll add a variable, I'll call it like x. and I'll set it equal to 0. So this object, form1, now has a variable called x, and it's got all these functions built into it. So maybe when I click on a button, maybe I take whatever that number is and I square it and I put it back in the box. So let's look at how we would do that. Let me double click on button 1 here. So what I'm going to do now is I've got to get the text out of the box, convert it to a number, and then do something with the number and put it back in the box. So let's think about how we do that. Let's make x equal to, okay, now I can't do this. I can't say text box 1 dot text because the text box text property contains a string, and x is not a string. X is an integer, right? We defined it as an int up there. So I have to convert this string to an integer. And one way to do that is using the convert object. There's an object called convert whose job is to do stuff like this. Convert, dot, and then let's look through the list of functions that are that's in this object. There's one here to int 32. There's to an integer. If you want a number with a decimal point, that's a double or a float. We'll just assume we're using integers. So let's make, we'll say to int 32, to a 32-bit integer. And let's put our parentheses around this. So the convert object has a function called toInt32 that takes another object as an input, and it will convert this to an integer and return it. So the way the single equal sign works is we evaluate the right side and then assign it to the left side. So we're going to take whatever's in text box 1, convert it to an integer, and store it in x. Cool. All right, well, now that x is an integer here, let's multiply x times itself or something. X equals x times x. All right, so x is, let's say, square x. All right, neat. Now, how do we put the value of x back in the text box? So again, that's the text property, text box 1, dot text equals. Now we can't do this. We can't go the other way because x is an integer and the text box property, the text property of the text box is a string. We can't convert, we need to convert explicitly from an integer to a string. X is not a string, so I can't put it into a text box, not directly. I have to convert it. So the easiest way to take a number and convert it to text is to use the toString function. ToString is built into every object in C#. Every object has a toString function. Well, if you don't believe me, check this out. The number 5, dot. I swear to God this works. ToString. ToString. Look, the number 5 has the toString function built into it. Because 5, it looks like a number, but everything in this C# framework is an object. Even numbers are objects. And objects have properties and functions. And one of the functions that all objects have in C# is toString. So let's convert x back to a string, and then we will put it in text box 1. So let's watch this. So actually, I'm going to put a breakpoint. I'm going to hit F9 on this line. Now let me run my little demo. And I'll click my button here. All right, so that's where our program is. So text box 1 contains the number 1000. And we're going to convert this to a 32-bit integer. So I'm going to hit F10. And what is x right now? X is 0, because we set it to 0 up at the top. There's x, as x is 0. So we're going to take whatever is in the text box, convert it to an integer, and assign it back to x. So let me hit F10 here to step to the next line. F10 steps you through your program. So what is x? X is now, there we go. X is now, well, it's still 1,000 because we haven't run this line. So x is now, what is that, 1,000,000? I can't really tell. It's a lot of zeros. But you can see x has been set to whatever, x has been multiplied by itself. X equals x times x. Take x, multiply it by itself, assign the result back to x. Okay, so now we're going to take the result x and put it in our text box. So I will now hit the F10 button again, and you can see we've taken X, converted it to a string, and put it back in the text box. So let's keep running, and you can see now we have that value in our text box. So if I clear this, now watch what happens if I click this button. Now the text box has an empty string in it. If I try to convert this to an integer, this isn't a valid integer, so it's going to blow up. System format exception. Okay. So how could we fix this? How can we kind of bulletproof our code? This is jumping ahead, but if you're going to do conversions that could potentially fail, you want to put this in a try catch block. Try catch. Actually, you can even, did I use the keyboard shortcuts there? Let's try tab, tab. Cool, look at that. It just stubbed it all out for us. I'm going to take all that code, I'm going to put it in my try block. And if it blows up, it's going to throw an exception, and the exception will get caught here in the catch block. So what I'll do here is I'll get rid of this, and I'll say message box.show invalid value. There we go. So let's try it again. So if you're going to do conversions, conversions could potentially fail. You probably want to put them inside a try catch block. So let's run this and see what happens. All right, so I'll clear my box here, put in the number 2, and click the button. So now I have 4 in there. Oh, cool! I can keep squaring the button, squaring the value until it overflows. There we go. Clear. All right. Now what if I try to click my button here? Invalid value. I don't know if you can see that. Invalid value. So let's put our breakpoint there and run this and just try that again. I'll clear that box, click the button. All right, so we're going to try to convert our empty string or space to a number. And look, it failed, and it jumped to the catch block, and the catch block is going to show that error message. So what this did was it prevented the program from crashing. The program was able to handle its own error condition. So, but that's what I wanted to show you here. That's how you get values out of a text box. You can just access them using the .text property, as we did here, textbox1.text. That'll get the value out. You can also assign a value to a text box's text property, and the catch is that that text property is a string. So anything you put in that text box's text property has to be a string, and the way to convert something to a string is to say .toString. If you're going the other way, if you have text that you need to convert to a number, you have your convert object, and that's got functions in it for different types of data, and conversions can potentially fail. So anytime you're doing a conversion like this, you want to have this code, the convert, inside of the try-catch block, so that if there is a failure, your program will handle it and not crash. So there we go. So there's a quick little demo on how to work with text boxes.